my name is Fiona and I'm about to tell you the secrets you need to get more split leaves on your Monstera Deliciosa. The care that you need to go from this to this. So you don't want to miss this episode about Monstera tips, from how to care for them, how to propagate them. We're also going to talk about variegated Monsteras and these dangling things that no one really talks about. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get my videos weekly. Just starting off with the basics, this is the Monstera Deliciosa, also known as the Swiss cheese plant. It's called that way because of all the holes that are in the leaves, and because of these holes, it's very easy for people to remember the Monstera even if they're not into plants, which is why it's a very trendy and popular plant, and I hope it stays that way because it's beautiful and also very easy to take care of. This plant originated from the tropical forest in Central America and South America. This is important to keep in mind depending on where you're from. It might need a little extra humidity or sunlight. There are also climbing plants that attach onto trees. What they do is they use their roots to wrap around the tree and move upward. They kind of use the tree as a trellis and they move upward towards the light, which is why they have these things called aerial roots. If your plant is just starting to develop these dangly, strange things and you've never heard of aerial roots, you're probably freaking out, but they're completely normal and natural. They don't harm your plant at all. I don't recommend cutting these aerial roots. I'm going to talk about what I do with them later on in the video. This plant produces flowers and fruits, and the fruits are actually edible. The fruits rarely produce for you in the indoor houseplant environment, so I've never tasted a Monstera fruit, but I would love to someday. Please note that the Monstera is not pet friendly, so it's toxic to our furry friends like our dogs and our cats. This was a problem for me when Thing was a kitten because he used to bite off every Monstera leaf that came off of this exact plant, and this was a problem that I had to fix. So if you have the same problem, please check out my video on how I stopped my cat from destroying my plants. I have two Monstera plants in here. I got them both 4 years ago as rooted cuttings. I believe they were $10 each, and they were one leaf cuttings, which I believe was considered cheap back then. I like that they were cuttings because I was living in a much smaller apartment with my parents, and I know that Monsteras can get really big and we just didn't have the place for it. So I like the fact that I could keep it in water. It was just living in like a small little cup. Funny story too, when I first started collecting houseplants, I did not like soil. I thought soil was dirty. I always associated soil with bugs. So my earlier collection consisted of plants growing in water and also air plants. But look at me now, all my plants are in soil, so goes to show you how things have changed. It wasn't until I moved out and got a bigger place that I transitioned my Monsteras back into soil, and even then it took a while for them to get used to. After that it did start to kickstart and growing new leaves. This is the newest leaf that I have over here. It's still soft. Once it hardens, it's gonna be a little bit bigger than this, probably like size of this size. So it's doing really well in soil. Fast forward now, you can get these at a very affordable price. I just saw like a good medium-sized one at Trader Joe's for $14 the other day. So it's very affordable here in the States. I'm wondering if it's affordable for you guys as well. Let me know in the comments below. Here I have a juvenile plant, and in the right conditions, this will probably take 1 to 2 years to give off that split leaf. It'll probably start off with one split in its leaf, and then as you kind of like go through the stages like Pokemon, you'll start getting more and more fenestrations. If you're interested in seeing the growth of your plant and, you know, seeing them go through these stages, I would say get a juvenile plant. But if you just want to skip to these like big beautiful fenestrations, I would say it's a lot easier for you to just buy it for $14 at Trader Joe's. In terms of watering, I water these guys once a week. I use a terracotta pot, which is good for absorbing any excess water. This terracotta pot has a drainage hole, so it's also good for draining that excess water so it doesn't stay on the bottom of the pot. Look for signs from the plant that it needs to be watered. So this guy looks pretty good right now. The leaves aren't curling, but usually if it's a little bit dehydrated, the leaves will start curling. A good example is this baby Monstera I have here. You see how the leaves are a little bit curled and soft? This is telling me that it needs to be watered. So I'm gonna water this after the video. In terms of the soil mix, I give it a well-draining soil mix that I mix myself. The most critical thing when purchasing or making your own potting mix is that you have enough adequate space for air, water, and healthy root growth. If you're interested in how I make my own potting mix, you can check out this video that I'll link in the descriptions below. In terms of temperature, they're not really picky. I have them living in between 60 degrees to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and it seems to be doing fine. I do realize that when it's hotter, it encourages more growth, and I think that goes for any plant. They're also not very picky with the humidity either. I have them living in between 50% to 20% humidity depending on the seasons. In the winter, it'll drop down to 20% and they're still doing fine. They'll still push out new growth. So all around, a very low maintenance and easy plant for beginners. Okay, here we go. This is the secret to getting more split leaves. It has to do with two things: the maturity of the plant and also the lighting condition. You can really see how the lighting affected my Monstera. Just looking at the oldest leaf, this one was from my old apartment, and this was a north-facing window with very low lighting conditions. As you can see, it reverted back to having no splits in the leaf. And this was also grown in the winter where we had basically only like 2 hours of direct sunlight in the north-facing window, so it was not happy at all. Then the next leaf that came out of it started having splits again. This was grown in the same apartment condition, but this was grown in the summer, so you can see there's more fenestrations growing here. We have 4 fenestrations, and then when we moved into this apartment where we had it growing in a south-facing window, it was a lot more happier. It has more fenestrations and splits. So this leaf was grown, I believe, in the summer of this apartment, and here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fenestrations. And this newest leaf that grew this summer, let's count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 fenestrations. So just looking at the different leaves on my Monstera, you can really tell how the lighting affected the number of fenestrations on the leaf. Also, going back to the maturity of the plant, I also think that because it's older, that's probably also why it has more fenestrations on its leaves. Another important thing to point out, if you're taking cuttings of your Monsteras, the old leaves will also revert back to that juvenile form. That's also why this looks the way it is. This is actually coming from the same cutting, but it got really long, so I cut it in half and I made 2 plants out of it. The growth point was on this main plant, which is why the leaves still came out very mature, but because this had to grow a completely new growth point over here, all the leaves that came out reverted back to that juvenile form. So if you're gonna make cuttings, you can make more plants, but there's a really high possibility that it'll just revert back to that juvenile heart-shaped leaves. Now we're gonna go back to talking about these things called aerial roots and a couple ways you can handle them. First method is that you can just stick them back into the soil. They're really just roots, so if you stick them back, they're just gonna continue growing. Another thing you can do with them is just have them hang outside your pot. I don't like doing that because they make the perfect cat toy, and this is very attractive to thing. Anything that is stringy and is dangly is perfect cat toy, so I don't like to do this. I just stick them back into the soil. Next thing we're going to talk about is vertical support for your Monstera. As I mentioned earlier, these are climbing plants, so if you don't give them the proper support, it will not grow bigger leaves, and also it'll get kind of out of control. It'll just start running around in your pot. So it's good to give them some vertical support. Here I'm using a moss pole that I bought on Amazon. This is already pre-made and they're extendable, which is perfect because I know this Monstera is just gonna get bigger. So right now this pole is a good size for this plant. As soon as it gets bigger, I'm gonna need an extension for it. And what I love about this is that it's a very sturdy moss pole. It's made of PVC pipe inside, so it won't be flimsy or anything like that. Usually if it's a smaller plant, I like to make my own DIY moss pole out of sphagnum moss. If you guys are interested in that, you can check out my video on an easy way to make your DIY moss pole. I like to make my own DIY moss pole because I can customize the size for that specific plant. In this case, when they're this big, it's just easier to buy extendable moss poles. It'll make your life a lot easier. Propagation methods. There are different ways you can propagate a Monstera. You can use leca, moss, or water. I like to think that the water propagation is the easiest and the best. All you have to do is find a node, which is that bumpy part, or you just find a aerial root and you just cut it and stick it in water. You can also try air layering it with moss. So all you need to do with that is just get a layer of damp moss and wrap it around a growth point or a node, and that will encourage aerial roots to grow. And once you see about like an inch or 2 inch of aerial roots, you can cut it and stick it in soil. It will grow. You can also use leca, which is used in semi-hydroponics. All you have to do is make a cutting, make sure it has a growth point or a node, and just stick it in leca, and it will encourage the aerial roots to grow out of the Monstera. There's a high demand for Monsteras, but there's a higher demand for variegated Monsteras. These variegated Monsteras can go up to $200 for a node cutting to $500 to $1,000 for a very mature plant. The reason why they're so expensive is because they're considered uncommon. Because essentially what a variegated Monstera is that it's a normal Monstera with a mutation that causes it to have these white marbling effects. It's simply aesthetics and makes them very beautiful, and they are very beautiful, but also makes them very expensive and hard to get. I'm not willing to pay $1,000 for a plant yet. I don't know if I ever will be willing to pay that much. But I've been waiting for these nurseries to mass produce these variegated Monsteras. I know that a few nurseries are, and the price will drop soon, so I've been waiting for that. I actually purchased a Monstera albo this year. It was my first plant purchase for 2021, and it was only for $30 because it is a low variegated Monstera. I thought that it was a really good price and it would make a really good experiment, which is why I bought it. I bought it from Ivy Plant Shops, which is located in Texas. And once in a while, she will give these plant sales where you can get variegated Monsteras for a very cheap price. Since there is variegation in the plant, there's a very high chance that the variegation will appear in the more mature leaves. This summer it hasn't really grown for me, which is why I got desperate and I tried that TikTok hack where you put the aerial root in water. Apparently this will make them grow faster and have bigger leaves. I just started this and I'm not sure if it'll work. So I just stuck it in water, I think 2 weeks ago, and it's already growing. Like the aerial root is growing a lot, which is good, but I don't see any movement or growth with the leaf, which is really what I want. I don't really want the aerial root to grow, I want the leaf to grow. So I'll keep you guys updated and see if that hack actually works on growing bigger leaves faster. There are different ways where you can get a variegated Monstera without paying $1,000. For me, I just got really patient. I was just waiting for the right price. Even though I have my own Monstera, I still look at Monsteras at Trader Joe's or big box stores to see if I can find like a variegated one. I've seen videos where people are very lucky and they find like a sported variegated one that's in Home Depot for like 14 bucks or something. So it's a good tip. You should always go check out the Monsteras. To conclude this video, Monsteras are tropical plants with a very unique appearance. They make really good beginner plants because they're so easy to take care of. I personally like to buy a juvenile plant and just go through the stages where it gets more and more fenestrations. To me, that's a very fulfilling part of being a plant parent. I like to think that they deserve to be trendy and popular plants. Thank you for watching this Monstera care video. I hope it answers any questions you have about the Monstera. Let me know if you have any more questions down in the comments below. Again, if you like this video, 10-second challenge to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video with all your friends. Thank you so much and see you guys next week. Bye!
Hold me tight. Could you hold me tight?